I did learn to bring like a red biohazard bag with me like everywhere. I actually almost kind of felt guilty. Obviously, like being pregnant is a huge blessing, but I'd be lying if I said there were instances where I actually felt guilty for being pregnant just because of the impact it was going to have on my team.
But I think also some women feel fear of actually telling the people that they work with that they're pregnant.
Hey there, my name's Ashley Church.
And I'm Erin West.
We were once newly promoted crime scene and latent print supervisors on mutual struggle buses as we both simultaneously tried to navigate through the challenges within our forensic units.
Now we run a business where we create tools and resources that we wish we had had to make these transitions easier. We like to talk about the experiences we've had in the forensic field, the good, the bad, and the ugly, in the hopes to create awareness around these issues and move the needle forward to create positive change in the forensic community.
So if you're a forensic professional, regardless of your years of experience, who's not afraid to dive into real, raw, and sometimes uncomfortable topics, you're in the right place.
This is the Forensics Unfiltered podcast.
Welcome to episode 2 of Taboo Topics. We will be talking about being pregnant as a CSI. Part of what we're going to discuss is obviously the perspective of someone actually being pregnant, right? And also the perspective of someone working on a team with someone else that's pregnant. So you could be male or female in that scenario. And at the very end, I think what's going to be even more valuable to talk about is rights as a pregnant person and what that means if you're in a supervisory position or if you're like more advanced on the chain of command. What do you want to make sure that you implement in your policies and your treatment towards a pregnant person so you don't find yourself in a lawsuit?
Hey guys.
So I'm pretty damn prepared to talk about this topic tonight. I told them we would start with the perspective of someone actually being pregnant and a CSI. So we'll start there. I remember when I became pregnant, I was actually had a very supportive group of people that I worked with, and they all happened to be female. My supervisor was pregnant at the time too. So she was going through the same things I was going through at the same time. And I also think that's, really helpful to have someone in your corner, especially if you work in an agency that's predominantly male, right? So some of the hardships that I went through is my pregnancies, like I vomit all the time, like all day long. It doesn't matter if I ate something, like it's just all day long. So before I was ready to tell anyone, I had to go to the landfill and search around like bags and bags and bags of garbage.
No bueno.
To find homicide evidence. And I had like one other CSI that went to the landfill with me to try to document everything and search with me. And I looked at her, I was like, I'm not ready to tell anyone else that I'm pregnant, but I figured I should let you know in case I need to like dart that way.
Because I'm going to be barfing all day.
Oh my gosh. I did learn to bring like a red biohazard bag with me like everywhere. It was always in my passenger seat of my van. It was common for me to just be like driving to a scene or doing the commute home. Like Erin, you do a commute home too. Mine was like 45 minutes to an hour. And I would just like grab my bag and keep driving. I know that's, probably not the safest thing to do, but it happens. So that was hard. And there was stuff that would never have made me even wince or gag that all of a sudden, like I remember going on a death investigation and this woman, presumably she actually like committed suicide in a pool. She like drowned herself, which is interesting. But
that's a horrible way to go.
Yeah, like that's some willpower.
Yeah.
But she defecated in the pool and like I was just zooming in with my camera to take a photo of the feces down at the bottom, and that made me throw up. So, that's just something that you could go through. It would have been really interesting this last pregnancy. I wasn't a CSI, I've been up here in South Carolina for a couple of years. So my last pregnancy, I wasn't working, but I had a lot of vertigo. So I don't know how well I would have been able to work as much as I did in my last pregnancy with like just feeling dizzy all the time. Something that's different for every pregnant person. It's just based on her own abilities and, you know, whether or not she has clearance by her doctor, if she has gestational diabetes or not. Like, I worked through my entire pregnancy. Like, I was still going on calls at like 40 weeks pregnant. Now, I did like dial it back. Like, I didn't go on as many calls. I didn't put myself like on call, doing the on-call shifts as often. There was a point where I stopped that. But I did work through the entire thing. So something that was really interesting, and I don't know if it was just an internal thing, like it was something that, an internal dialogue that I was playing in my own head, or if it was because of the way I saw other pregnant people get treated at other agencies, not necessarily this one, was I actually almost kind of felt guilty because I was putting my coworkers in a situation where they're going to have to pick up more calls and more casework and be on call more often. It was just like an interesting dynamic. Obviously, like being pregnant is a huge blessing, but I'd be lying if I said there were instances where I actually felt guilty for being pregnant just because of the impact it was going to have on my team.
Well, I think not even only, I mean, I have not been pregnant as a CSI, but I think not only guilt, you know, I think some people do feel guilt that they are working really hard and they have to dial it back and lean on their team during this period of time. But I think also some women feel fear of actually telling the people that they work with that they're pregnant. So I definitely worked with people that were hiding their pregnancies and not wanting to tell people that they were pregnant because they were so fearful about like the repercussions of being pregnant, which really is kind of crazy because it's like, it's just a regular common thing. It happens all the time. And like, I know we've talked a lot about where we are, you know, we're mostly civilian and mostly female. Like I have worked in almost entirely female units my entire career. So somebody being pregnant, like if someone's not pregnant right now, someone's going to be pregnant soon. It's just part of, it's just part of the culture that we're in. And it's not that big of a deal. Like everybody, all the staff members, all the pregnant women, everybody has survived somebody being pregnant. Like it's totally going to be fine. So I don't know why we make it such a big deal.
Yeah, it's definitely temporary. And like kind of piggybacking off of that too, like on the guilt train, right? I think more times than not, people push themselves past their limits when they're pregnant because they feel guilty that they can't take on more, right? So I think there's definitely situations, possibly like while I was pregnant, where, you know, maybe I shouldn't have gone too hard on that scene, or maybe I should have taken more breaks. But, you know, I wanted to keep on.
You were just seeing, she was super preggers, and we called it the scene we jokingly referred to as the OK Corral, because like basically there were like hundreds of rounds. And so she's super pregnant out there working, or was that after you just had the baby?
That was Heather.
Was it?
The OK Corral one. Yeah, that was
when
Heather.
she was pregnant?
Yeah, she was out there.
And somebody out there was pregnant, and it was like hundreds and hundreds of rounds. It's like the Florida heat, and they're out there for like forever. And whoever it was, if it was Heather, I mean, they were out there the whole time with everybody else. And it's maybe not entirely necessary at that point in your life, you know?
Exactly.
It's fine to take a break.
Take a damn break.
Yes.
It's hard about doing that in general. Like there's people that are not pregnant that push themselves past their limitations. Like, take a damn break. But I feel like, at least when I was pregnant, I felt like I probably pushed myself past my limitations more often. Probably because I was also naive. It was my first pregnancy. I'm like, oh, I could totally keep doing this. And you become fatigued and winded really easily. And the Florida heat can add an interesting element onto that as well. So some people asked, were you still processing items with black powder and dicing? So yes, I felt comfortable. I did like amp up the PPE a little bit more. You know, any chemical, I know there are agencies out here or people that, you know, want to process their stuff quickly and they don't use the fume hood. So I was very like particular about making sure the fume hood was working at its maximum capacity, so I wasn't failing.
Even PPE in general. I mean, there's agencies out there that, I mean, sometimes our girls even do it where they're, you know, they won't wear their lab coat and stuff like that. Like a lot of the chemicals that we have shouldn't even touch your skin. So amping up the PPE is big. We definitely had in the FBI lab that I worked at, we had huge super glue chambers that you could actually walk into, like multiple people could stand in them. They were so large. And when people were pregnant, they would avoid that room entirely. Like other people would fume their items. They wouldn't go in there at all because the fumes were, I mean, the chambers were huge. So like avoiding things like that, or, you know, having a teammate help you out if they can or whatever. Definitely increasing the PPE, wearing your lab coat, wearing your, you know, face mask so that you're not breathing powder. I know nobody wants to wear that when they're powdering because it's already uncomfortable enough, but not breathing in the particles, not letting the chemicals touch your skin. I mean, all that stuff's important anyways, but we get kind of lax with it, but
totally lax. Even like respirators. Like I know people don't want to feel weak using a respirator like on a decomp, but what you're inhaling is really freaking gross. And on top of that, if there's a ton of fly activity, guess what? The fly is like sponging up that decomp or that like, you know, blood matter. And if it gets into your nose or in your mouth, like now you have
super gross
exposure to like bloodborne pathogens and shit. So yeah, I was really careful, like amping up my PPE even more than I would have if I wasn't pregnant. But that was what I was comfortable with. Now there's going to be situations you have to refer to your doctor where, you know, you have to dial it back even more. So that's, you know, really entirely dependent on the person. Now, as far as working with someone that's pregnant, like I said before, I think more times than not, I don't know about the other forensic communities, but as CSIs, like we like to go out on calls and do the dirty stuff. So I didn't see this as much. Like more people are willing to, whatever they can do, they're willing to keep on as much as their job duties as they can.
Yeah.
But I have seen some people where they just like throw in the towel and pregnant and then they're not willing to do any of the work or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I've definitely seen both sides of the spectrum too. I've worked with women like you and women like Heather and, you know, that have been pregnant and have busted their ass all the way up until the end, probably when they shouldn't have. And then I've seen the opposite too, that the instant they get pregnant, they're like, well, I can't do any more work. And if your doctor has facilitated that, and
that's different,
you legitimately have to go on light duty for whatever reasons, you can't go out on calls and you can't do stuff in the office. That's not what I'm talking about here. But I've seen women do it both ways where they are, you know, crushing it all the way up to the end and then also using that pregnancy almost as an excuse to get out of work, you know. And obviously for
on call,
to be off call, and then even extending it far out after, you know, after the baby's born, having it be a reason why you can't be on call or you can't use chemicals or powders or you can't do portions of your job because now you have an infant. So, and I'm sure Ashley has some stuff for that, but how long do you keep someone in that position that's no longer doing that job function? So,
yeah. And that's like, it's a loaded question. It's such a hard question to answer. Totally dependent on the person and what you're exposed to. All labs have different reagents that they're working with, different job duties. So it really depends on what you do at your agency. But as a team member, like I can understand, not saying that it's right, but I can understand when you get frustrated because now you're taking on all of this extra work and extra job responsibilities with no relief in sight. You know what I mean? If they're going to continue that, like, while they're breastfeeding, well, how long? You don't know. Like, you know, that's someone's choice on how long they want to breastfeed or how long they have to wait until they're exposed to some of the things that we're exposed to.
Yeah. I was watching 90 Day Fiance last night. Does anybody else watch that? It was,
I watched it when I'm with you.
The Tell All was on last night, and one of the guys on there, he breastfed till he was 9. And I was like, oh,
Wow.
seems like a lot, you know. Maybe it's just me. But that's what Ashley's talking about. I mean, if you can't perform certain activities because you're breastfeeding, like, how long does that last? You know, do they hold your position for a year? Do they hold it for 9 years while they're waiting for you to finish breastfeeding your child? But like in general, I think for the most part, like Ashley said, I've seen more women work super hard when they're pregnant versus like checking out immediately the first sign of pregnancy. And I will say, like, this is something, you know, us as supervisors, we talk about this all the time. Like, there's so many supervisors out there that are like shocked when people leave and they're like, oh my God, they're leaving. Like, what am I supposed to do? And we are of the belief that you should always be prepared for someone to leave. You know, you should never think that the staff that you have is the staff that you're going to have for forever and that everything's all fine and good and you're never going to have to train anybody and anything like that. And it's the same thing with pregnancy. You know, if you have a mindset of people are going to leave and their lives are going to change and we're always in flux here, you know, it's not this permanent steady thing that's going to last forever. Like, our world is always in flux, then it's not so much of a panic attack when somebody's like, I'm pregnant. Then you can have the legitimate reaction of like, congratulations, that's awesome. I am super excited for you. Instead of the reaction of like,
genuine.
oh my God, what am I going to do now? Because so many supervisors have that like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Like they're so shocked. They had no idea that anyone would ever leave. So like, at least us as leaders, for those of you that are leaders, like, just be prepared for it. It's just part of life changes, and the unit's always going to be going through a cycle of new people coming in and people leaving for whatever various reasons. And it's not the end of the world. Everybody makes it through.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to like point fingers or make excuses, but I also think that police departments, sheriff's offices, forensic labs, whatever, we shoot ourselves in the foot, because we don't prepare for these situations. We work with a bare bones staff as it is. So if anyone leaves or, you know, gets injured or becomes pregnant, you already work with a short staff, a bare bones staff, and now you're reducing it down even more. Like, I forget where I read it, but I think they said, like, you know, you should account and have like 20% extra staff for when stuff like this happens, because it's going to, whether someone becomes pregnant or, you know, gets injured or leaves, your team shouldn't be
so badly.
Yeah, they should still be able to function and not like be team no sleep and working 24 hours. Like, you can't ask your staff to do that too.
Anyone out there working with extra staff? You just have an abundance of staff. Yeah. Yeah, not us either.
But I mean, like, I feel like patrol does it a little bit more. Like, there's a little bit more fluff room. Like, if they were down a person or two, like, they can make do, you know? Whereas I feel like forensic units, it's like sink or swim. You're going to freaking struggle. Sorry. You know? I feel like we kind of do it to ourselves because, I mean, gosh, how many agencies do we know where there's just like 1 or 2 people or maybe 3 people? And it's like, those people are working their asses off. And if anyone becomes pregnant, like, it's just part of life. Like, be prepared for it. And don't be reactive, be proactive.
Agreed.
Continuing that note, like, as far as my experience goes, it is also difficult when you come back from maternity leave. I was also very fortunate to be in a situation where I had my own office. So whenever I had to pump, which is very often at the beginning, you know, I can close my door and have privacy. Most people do not have that luxury. In fact, there are agencies out there that don't have a designated room for nursing mothers. So I think that's something that, like, get on that, because I don't think it's going to be as acceptable anymore. But yeah. I do know situations where pregnant women had to, like, go in their vans and pump, or, you know, if they didn't want to go outside and sit in a really hot car to pump, they tried to pump at their desk, and then they would get in trouble, which I understand that too. Like, maybe you're uncomfortable around someone else that's pumping, or maybe it's a distraction because those pumps are really loud. But it's something that I don't think a lot of agencies are prepared for either. Like, what happens when you come back and you're breastfeeding or pumping or whatever?
Or even in the CSIs, you know, the women are doing that on scene too.
Yes.
I mean, they're doing it in their vehicles on scenes.
Yeah.
So just a little, like, if they have to take a break every so often to go and do that, I mean, just understanding they have to pump. Like, the women have to pump. Otherwise, they're, like, in pain.
Yeah. You get engorged, and it's super painful. And oh my gosh, there's a couple of situations where, like, I forgot the car adapter or certain parts to my pump, and I'm like, what am I going to do? Past, like, just it being painful, you can also get really bad infections if you don't pump. So it's a necessity. It's not because these people are trying to freeload and take more breaks than they should. It's like they have to do it. Someone says, been there, done that several times. Yes. And it can be awkward. Like, also, you know, you have to be prepared with some type of cover, or, you know, I would let the detectives or deputies know, like, hey, I'm going to my car. Just, like, you know,
don't come over here.
Don't come over here. Text me if you need anything. But some people maybe aren't as comfortable announcing that. So just know that that's something that they could be going through as well. Something that we also talk about in our supervision course is protected classes, because it is super important for you if you're going to be a leader in your unit, or if you plan to become pregnant or are pregnant right now, it is super important to know your rights. So just like race, age, sex, like, all of those are protected classes. Pregnant women are protected class too, and they have certain rights. So this is actually from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and it states that under this Discrimination Act, it forbids discrimination when it comes to any aspect of employment, including hiring, firing, pay, job assignments, promotions, layoffs, training, fringe and benefits such as leave and health insurance, and any term or condition of employment. Interesting story for this one. So whenever I was pregnant, I actually got promoted to supervisor. So I was a crime scene investigator first. The supervisor spot became open, and I was promoted to supervisor. And I had been doing the job functions of a supervisor and a CSI, to be honest, for months. And I was waiting on the promotion ceremony, and I don't have any proof. It's just a rumor, but I did hear they were considering delaying my promotion until after I come back from maternity leave, because they didn't want to pay me the extra money.
Or to make sure you came back.
Or to make sure. But regardless, if that would have been offered to anyone if they were not pregnant, you know, we're going to give you this promotion after X amount of months, and they wouldn't have delayed it, then as a pregnant woman, I have that right too. If they would have delayed it, thankfully they didn't, but if they would have delayed it, I probably would have had good ground to stand on for contacting a lawyer. So that's super important to understand.
Mm-hmm.
So under this act, it says that pregnant people or pregnant women must be treated the same way as they treat other temporarily disabled employees. So anyone, if it's on the job injury, if they're having a surgery, if you offer them certain things, then you are legally obligated to offer that to a pregnant person. Now, if there's certain things that you deny someone that's maybe on light duty, like if you're on light duty and you don't have the privilege to, I don't know, select your job duties, like maybe like you have no choice in the matter of what assignment you get, or, you know, if there's certain things like scheduling, if you're going to offer that to someone that's on light duty or not offer it, then you have to treat the pregnant person the same way. That's something to note. If just make some observations of how your agency accommodates other people that become injured or are temporarily disabled. And also look, you probably have some type of light duty policy. So look at that. If you don't have a pregnancy policy, which we'll talk about in a little bit, look at your light duty policy, and your agency should be treating you the same.
Mm-hmm. I'm talking HR department too, because even if you're not pregnant right now, if you're planning on getting pregnant, some of your agencies might have a light duty policy, and, you know, pregnancy might fall under light duty, but you might be perfectly fine and not want to go on light duty and want to work your shift, your normal shift, and do your normal job for as long as you possibly can until it gets to a point where you're like, okay, I can't anymore. And so, you know, if you work with your HR department, maybe you can avoid being considered somebody that's a light duty person until it's time to be light duty, as long as they have, you know, a doctor's note saying that you can perform the job functions, and you should be good to go. Because I think that's the thing for some women too, is that they love their job and they don't want to give up doing what they're doing for 9 months just because they've become pregnant when they feel fine, doing fine, you know?
I think that's like definitely a situation where agencies have become more reactive. They're like, oh my God, they're pregnant. We're just going to like, they're automatically off duty or light duty.
I mean, there's like pregnant Olympians now.
Running like marathons and shit.
Yes, right. Marathons.
Crazy.
It's fine. Women have done it for forever. They're fine.
Yeah, I agree. Something else that's also really interesting is impairments resulting from pregnancy, such as gestational diabetes or preeclampsia, may be disabilities under the ADA, so the Americans with Disability Act, in which case your agency is required under that act to provide you reasonable accommodations if it's not an undue hardship onto that agency. So we talk about this in our supervision class too. Undue hardship is going to be defined differently depending on what resources and accommodation a specific agency or lab is able to accommodate. So the bigger labs,
going to come down to your size. Yeah. Going to come down to the size of your agency. If you work for a teeny tiny agency, it will likely cause them undue hardship to give you whatever extras you need to do the job. If you work for a large agency, it should be a lot easier for them to accommodate you.
And just know, like, I know some people are very private, you know, they don't want a lot of their medical information to be out there and their employers have access to it. However, if someone that's temporarily disabled or injured is required to submit a doctor's note stating their concerns for their ability to work or to be able to grant leave or sick benefits, then you are also required to submit a doctor's note as well. So just be aware of that. And then FMLA. So someone brought this up in my messages before as well. That's going to be dependent on the state that you're in and your agency. So definitely talk to your HR department about that. And it does get a little bit tricky if your partner also works at the sheriff's office or police department lab. You know, it may be an instance where, depending on the laws where you're at or whatever, where they only grant one parent the maternity leave, or you both have to take it at the same time, or maybe you're allowed for one parent to take their maternity leave for the first 3 months and the other parent can take their paternity leave for the next 3 months. So that's going to be completely dependent on where you're at. So I thought that was interesting too. And that can be really difficult to coordinate, especially if you don't have family or friends around and you're like trying to be on call, but also care for a newborn all hours of the day. And if both people are on call, like, oh my God. So the reason why we press this so much is because we don't want you guys to be in a situation where unknowingly you're creating a big lawsuit for your agency. So there were a couple of cases that and they're pretty recent, like this one's from 2017. Let's see when this one is. 2018. So these are pretty recent, and they are police officers, so it's slightly different, but I don't think just because you're a civilian, like the laws still apply to you, as far as like becoming pregnant. So these are a couple of cases where these women actually won these lawsuits. One of them was in Illinois. So this woman was forced to be off the job for 7 months without a paycheck. She did ask to
no, hell no.
Yeah. So
you can't do that.
They didn't like go straight to light duty. They went straight to you can't work here.
Oh no.
And, yeah, we'll hold your position.
That lawsuit coming down the pipe.
Yeah. This is what happened to her. So she asked to modify her duties so that she could work safely through her pregnancy. She offered a couple of suggestions, that she could perform, and they refused, claiming only officers with on-the-job injuries were entitled to light duty, which we know now from the Pregnancy Discrimination Act that is false, right? Completely false. If they're going to allow light duty for on-the-job injuries, they need to allow that for pregnant women as well.
That's not even true anyways, because every agency will allow you some kind of light duty. I mean, like I broke my leg off duty outside of work. They still let me come back to work early before the bones were fully healed. There's people working at our agency all over the place that have, at all agencies that have some kind of injury that's not necessarily related to in-house injury. So
you're going to offer it to anyone else.
Yeah.
Then you should offer it to someone that is pregnant. So just be mindful of that. They also made it impossible for her to continue working safely. They refused to provide her with uniforms and protective gear that would fit her changing body. So if you've been pregnant, like first row, are your boobs.
No offense to our pregnant ladies. This is not, it's going to sound worse than I mean it to, but people get fat all the time. Okay. Like there are male deputies who chunk it up over the years, and you'll should be sure they give them a larger vest or larger pants or a larger top. I mean, that happens all the time. So that's crazy to think that as she was growing, they wouldn't give her larger gear. Like, Come on.
Yep.
Wow.
So
that's a good story. Tell us more.
This is 2017 in Connecticut. So, this shit happens. They ultimately forced her off the job onto unpaid leave when she was 5 months pregnant. She exhausted her paid benefit time and drew from her pension.
Awful.
Ultimately, she won that lawsuit.
You probably made a pretty penny too.
Yep, I'm sure she did. And there's, other instances too. So in the same token, kind of the same situation in Connecticut. This was the one in 2018. They were forced her onto unpaid leave in her 5th month of pregnancy. She also won that lawsuit. The town agreed to reimburse her for wages and paid time off that were lost. It just states that federal laws require covered employees, including law enforcement, to treat pregnant workers the same as they would treat other workers similar in their ability or inability to work.
Isn't it amazing? Like you hear stuff like this and you're like, people should know better. Can't believe people are doing that out there, but people still do it all the time.
Yes.
Let's see. An officer at my agency sued the department for not having a place to pump. She won the lawsuit and they had to make space for new mothers. Yeah.
Yep. That is a perfect comment to segue into the next one. So in this lawsuit, I'm still reading from the same article, because of these cases and the way the court ruled, they also found that there is a liability for pregnancy discrimination. It does not end simply because the woman is no longer pregnant. So you are also protected under this act if you're breastfeeding or, need special accommodations, like maybe you had a really traumatic birth experience or something like that. So you were covered under this act even after you were no longer pregnant. So I also found that really interesting. The third one from Alabama, it was an officer who was forced out of work for breastfeeding upon her return from maternity leave. So I don't know if she was denied a benefit like somewhere to pump. I don't know what the details are of that, but that lawsuit came about because of breastfeeding. Again, they said that pregnant women are required to receive the same benefits, including policies offering temporary light duty as non-pregnant colleagues who are similar in their ability or inabilities to work. These rights apply regardless of how those colleagues came to need light duty. So they can't have preferential treatment, you know, based on how they started their light duty. So I thought that was really interesting. Isn't that crazy?
It is
And
great.
that was 2017, 2018, like that's recent.
You'd think agencies would be smarter than that by now. Be like, we probably shouldn't be doing this, but clearly they still do.
Yeah. So this was written in 2011. It's from Police One magazine. It's called What Do You Do with a Pregnant Cop? So to offer some solutions for you. You really should have, according to this, a pregnancy policy. So I know a lot of agencies have a maternity policy, but do you have a pregnancy policy? Something she also suggests is that pregnant people should be included in this conversation of what this policy is going to entail. I don't know if you guys have ever worked in a unit where they started changing your policies, like your procedures in the forensic world, and the people that were making these policies have never worked in forensics. So it like jacked up your stuff, right? There's policies that probably don't make any sense or that limit you to be able to do your job. So same thing with a pregnancy policy. It shouldn't just be created and enforced based off of someone's perception that has never been pregnant before. I thought that was interesting. Do you know if your agency has a pregnancy policy?
I don't think so. I don't think a specific pregnancy policy, no.
Okay. And they did make a distinction that a maternity policy is not a pregnancy policy. Don't try to lump it all into one. That doesn't work either. That's not clear enough. I think that's pretty much it. Just keeping in mind, like, basically, if you don't have a pregnancy policy, you may fall under your light duty policy. And they also said for the pregnant people to, you know, just be a little bit humble, right? So if they are going to accommodate you and give you a light duty assignment, sometimes you don't have a choice in the matter of what you do.
Yeah.
And they're not obligated to, like, give you preferential treatment on your light duty assignment either.
Yeah. You'll be doing like whatever filing somebody in the agency's got to do.
Yeah.
Like whatever that kind of work is, that's what you'll be doing. But at least they're giving you the opportunity to do that.
That's pretty much all I have, unless you have anything else to add, Erin.
Nope. I didn't have
Any other questions from you guys? Any other things you want to share? Maybe experiences that you've gone through? If you are having issues or have questions, like reach out to your human resources department and they will probably be able to direct you on your own agency or your own state laws better than we can. So
definitely.
But we're always here for support. So next week, we will be talking about pay for forensic professionals. And all things encompassing that.
Oh gosh, it's such a large topic.
Maybe
Yeah.
It might be a two-parter. We'll see how
We might have to two-part it. So, all right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on here next Tuesday.
All right. Have a great night.
Bye.
Thank you so much for being here and listening to Forensics Unfiltered. If you liked this episode, would you do us a favor and leave a review letting us know specifically what you liked about this topic? It will only take a minute, but it will really help us plan future episodes so we can bring you more topics that you want to listen to. We'll be sure to provide any links from today's episode in our show notes on our website. Head to www.gapscience.com. Until next time, stay safe out there.